Hello, I'm District 4 Councilman Ron Bowen, and welcome to another edition of PSL Living, your chance to meet the people that are making things happen on the Treasure Coast and in Port St. Lucie. And with me today, I have two special guests to talk about a very, very important topic, and it's on everybody's mind on a daily basis, and that's saving the Indian River Lagoon. And with me today is the founder of Save the Indian River Lagoon, Carrie West, and advocate Gail Ryan. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning,
Welcome to TV20 and PSL Living. I don't know where to start other than I met both of you about 5 years ago as successful businesswomen, and all of a sudden here you are 4 or 5 years later, you've become real big advocates for saving the Indian River Lagoon. I'm very appreciative. Coming from Cleveland, Ohio, I think I shared with you before, I saw a river, the Cuyahoga River, kill Lake Erie. And what I'm trying to say, back in the 60s and 70s, they polluted the river so badly, Lake Erie died. There were no walleye, there were no pike, there were no perch, and just basically bottom feeding fish. And all of a sudden, fast forward, here we are in 2016, and all of a sudden I'm seeing a lake kill a river or river lagoon. So I wanted to have both of you out here today and use this as a forum for you to give us a 101 on what's going on. I get your daily updates on Facebook. I'm very appreciative of that, but I think you should tell the Treasure Coast what you're doing and how they can help.
Great. Thank you for having us, Ron.
Thank you so much. I went swimming and got a rash all over my upper body, and I called Carrie, because she's a friend of mine, and she said that's the discharges poisoning the river. So she told me about Save the Indian River Lagoon in caps on Facebook that she had started, and could I help her a little? So that's when I started in June of 2013, and I haven't stopped. It's a daily thing now. I even started my own group last summer of 2013/14, 15, 16. So that's how long we've been working on this. Shortly after the discharges in 2013, Eve Samples started the Indian River Lagoon team with the Stuart News and TC Palm, and we have Ed Killer and Tyler Treadwell constantly writing articles about this. In 2013, we had thousands of people out at the St. Lucie locks because Rick Scott was going to there. We had signs. We were having a rally at the locks where the water is discharged, and he drove in, he walked in the office, came back out, got back in his car and left. He would not speak to anyone, and he has not really spoken to any of us in a very productive way since, and it's just been going downhill. I get clean water declarations signed by the Sierra Club for 3 years, and they send them up to Tallahassee every month. So we do that at the Stewart Green Market. So we educate the public, talk to them, they sign, they tell us their problems, and you would be amazed at what people are telling me. They're leaving here, they're not buying property, it's ruining their businesses, their children are getting sick, they can't do anything in the water, and so they're just leaving, or they're just stuck. I mean, what are you going to do after you've bought a house?
Right. Somebody explained to me this morning, actually, is if we don't do something, it's going to be turning from a recreational river into an industrial river.
Exactly.
Well, Florida is tourism and water. That's, what else do we have besides golf?
Sure.
Well, in 2013, when I started this group at the beginning of June, we had started to see the discharges affect the wildlife. We had lost over 800 manatees, over 700 and something dolphins up the Indian River Lagoon. Most people don't realize that it's a saltwater estuary and a hatchery. It extends for 156 miles up our coast. It's where everybody goes to play, but what we don't realize is the microcosms of things that are going on in that lagoon on a natural state. So 4,300 species being reduced to less than 200 is pretty significant, and we feel like we're being eco-terrorized by our state government. Basically, they're doing very limited things. They come out in the newspaper and say we care, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, but we've been very ineffective as far as the state government goes. And the federal government has had a very difficult time with the state government as well. Back in 2013, I went to Patrick Murphy's office. He was our elected congressman for the area. He basically serves over 1 million people in the 5-county area. And I went to his desk and I slammed my hands on his desk and I said, we're going to do it the easy way or we're going to do it the hard way, but we're going to do it.
Sure.
And he has just rolled out the red carpet, took us to D.C., let us all have our chance to speak to Congress, and he's advocated. We've gotten a lot of money offered from the federal government, but just like in 2000, we had Jeb Bush who agreed with the federal government for us to receive $11 billion for that Everglades restoration, but 3 years later, Jeb Bush actually reneged on that, and we lost all of our ground. Ever since then, it's been a larger and larger volume of this. We have never, ever in the history of discharges into this lagoon had the volume that we are getting in the last 3-4 years, or have we had the concentration of chemicals. It is a whole new ball game, and it is a human health risk. And when people find out not only that they can't swim in it and they can't play in it and they can't fish out of it, but that there's a health risk to it, the state of Florida is going to take a really big hit, and our businesses locally are going to fall, which we're already seeing, and it's just going to keep going. So
I made a public comment. Funny you mentioned I made a public comment when we had a workshop and they were talking about increasing the sales tax by 0.5 cent and all that. And I said, yeah, if that money goes for the restoration of the lagoon or something, that's fine. But I told them it's turning into a big sewer.
We would all gladly pay.
Right.
To do our part. The citizens of this whole area, I mean, we moved here, or we grew up here, or we love it here and want to visit here because of our environment, not because of a building, not because of a street sign, not because of, we live here because of our environment.
Let me ask you, either one of you, a quick question. And again, it still hasn't filtered through my mind. I sit on as a board member of the Regional Planning Council. I heard the South Florida Water Management presentation about 2 months ago, and they were talking about discharges and it's the Army Corps of Engineers, who, again, I know it's an agency, but is there a face to the Army Corps of Engineers, or it's always...
We have Colonel Dodd pushing the button, and years ago...
Okay, there's an actual...
Yeah, Colonel Dodd is pushing the button right now over in Lake Okeechobee since, I think, 2013.
Okay.
We had a gentleman, which I'm not sure of his name, but we had another man in there that managed the discharges a little bit here and a little bit there. He did a much better job. Colonel Dodd, however, is a by-the-book button pusher, and he just follows this schedule, whether it makes good sense or whether it's going to kill or whether it's going to...
Okay, thank you.
He doesn't really have any discretion whatsoever. He just goes by the book, and it's become a very dangerous
that is, Carrie,
scenario.
No, it is, because in the city council we were supportive of sending a letter to the Governor Scott, and then the governor, he can't do anything. It seems like the Army Corps of Engineers is really kind of controlling.
Well, the EPA has been gutted too in the state of Florida, and the EPA told me in 2013. I spoke with a gentleman named Gary up in Atlanta, and he said to me that we have almost mined all of our phosphates out of the state of Florida. We have less than 30 years. So that was 3-4 years ago. So now we have about 25-26 years worth of phosphates left in the state of Florida. However, what's interesting is, guess where all the phosphates are? They're in the bottom of Lake Okeechobee, 6 to 8 foot of sludge, and it's all phosphorus. And so when they get done mining everything out of the state of Florida and dumping it into Lake Okeechobee, then they have plans to go and dredge it to reclaim them. So that's quite an interesting little tidbit there coming from the EPA. But their hands are tied. They're not being funded. They're not being paid attention to. They have no regulations. There's no EPA police. There's nobody showing up. If there were, that whole river would be quarantined off and nobody would get in contact with it at all if the EPA was really able to do what they should be doing.
So there's a number of agencies that can really, I can't say blame, but that could solve the problem if they really put their will to it.
I'm going to repeat something that Marty Baum and I, it's a joke between the two of us. Even a 3-year-old knows better. How can you be sitting in those kinds of seats and those kinds of positions and not be aware of the issues that are facing the citizens of this state? We are being held hostage by our government. We have it in our Constitution to protect our environment, and yet that's the one thing in the whole Constitution for the state of Florida that's being blatantly ignored by every institutional organization that has anything to do with this lagoon. So, and other bodies of water in Florida too.
I think we both talked. I talked to both of you before we started taping about the agricultural and Big Sugar. You want to expound on that, Gail or Carrie, about what they're doing or what
Big Sugar? Big Sugar's been in the state of Florida for a long time. I happen to be a 10-generation Florida girl. I'm kind of. It's normal for me to be around the big ag people or even the small ag people. It's part of my family lineage too. So we don't really, and I'm half Cuban as well, so we don't really like to bash the Cuban farmers, Big Sugar necessarily, but Big Sugar has taken subsidies and they have claimed that they're going to be good stewards of the land, and we have caught them in the middle of the night back pumping into Lake Okeechobee, which is against the Clean Water Act. This problem with Big Sugar, I don't think we've ever seen an ad for Big Sugar, advocating anything in the history of them being in the state, right? But all of a sudden now, in the last year or so, we're seeing one ad after another. And I think that's a little telltale. I think it's also telltale when we have huge contributions to our politicians locally, which Patrick Murphy, by the way, did not take money. He was offered money and sent it back. But so many of them, like Joe Negron and Gail Harrell, they're all in bed with them. If you give me $1 billion, I'm going to be your friend, and I'm going to do what you like me to do. And this is how the politics are running. It's not being a good advocate or a good steward or a man of service or a woman of service to the people. You're turning this into a monetary gain program where everybody that's a citizen loses, but the politicians win. So Big Sugar has played their role, and I got to admit it, they've done it beautifully. But we've formed Bull Sugar to counteract all the things and to show and to give the real evidence about what sugar has actually done to the state of Florida. And they're not sorry about it. That's the main thing. They're not sorry about it. And when we just caught them, a few months ago, back pumping into Lake Okeechobee, they can say this and all they want to, all day long, about what good stewards they are. But the proof is in the pudding, and it's live and in living color, and they're just contaminating the crap out of both ends of this state. And they're denying the Everglades to be restored too. So they're really the monkey in the middle, and they're being protected by our governor and his appointed cabinet.
I've read both of your comments about some of the people who haven't helped, and I was surprised.
Adam Putnam was fun.
I think Senator Rubio was mentioned by one of you.
No show Rubio.
Okay, but one of you mentioned.
We gave him dirty bottles of dirty water 3 years ago, and he's done nothing.
He's a puppet. He doesn't say a word about anything in any direction. So that's a real crying shame, which is actually what's happening. The money is breeding these politicians that pander to the polluters.
What can local government do? Again, I go back to 1992 when I first served on the Port St. Lucie City Council. We got everybody off septic tanks and did a water and sewer assessment. And we've talked about it before. Septic tanks really isn't, it's an issue, but it's not the biggest issue. But what can local government, what can the city of Port St. Lucie do? What can Martin County and Susan
Port St. Lucie
do to help get this thing unified and move forward?
Maybe when we send out water bills, maybe we could put a simple line on the bottom. We've asked for this before. We've come down here and asked for this before. Basically, what we want to do is we want the good, conscious people, the community of people, to be conscious of the herbicides, the pesticides, the fungicides, the fertilizers. Use natural, organic practices in your own home. That will eliminate things going into the swale, going into our little retention ponds, and eventually making it to the lagoon. If we all stop buying these chemicals, maybe the chemical companies will start producing something that's better for the environment. And I'd like to add one quick thing. The herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, all of them are clear chemicals. When we see the river look brown, it's because of the tannins. It's the dead seagrass. It's everything that has died. Once that washes out, the lagoon might be blue and green again. However, the chemicals are clear and they're in the sediment. So even though it looks clear, that is not a clean, healthy river. river at this point.
And we finally got the fertilizer bans in several counties last year, but right away I'm a little bit of a pessimist because there is no fertilizer police. There's no way to enforce these fertilizers bans. Anyone can do it at night, when no one's watching. And several states are starting now, and this is another thing I want to get going. Contacting corporate Home Depot, Ace Hardware, Lowe's. If you have a fertilizer ban and you're not supposed to be using these products from June until the fertilizer ban months, they should not be on the shelves. You should not be able to allowed to buy Roundup.
Well, because we're such a transient area too. People come here and they don't realize what we're dealing with. They don't know. You travel the country and you see a river, and most rivers that are freshwater look brown. So they come here and they see a brown river, they just think it's a freshwater, it should look like Bora Bora. And it doesn't. And imagine if it did. Imagine how prolific the fish would be. Imagine how thriving our economy would be. Imagine the tourism that would show up and would want to come here from all over the world if it was a healthy lagoon. So we can't advocate. We really are annoyed. Like when Adam Putnam came here and talked about tourism at the Elliott Museum, that was kind of ridiculous. You're killing us, and yet you're wanting to promote tourism so we can get people that are not from here to go swimming and get sick and go back to their state and never put two and two together as to where they got sick.
Sure.
Martin Memorial came out and we filmed him. It's on YouTube. I do have a YouTube page that has several of our protests and whatever. But one of the interesting things was Martin Memorial came out and said that it's unknown bacterium that they cannot treat. It's very, very, very difficult. So imagine if you have an immune problem. Imagine if you already have cancer. Imagine if you're a child and you're taking in all these endocrine receptor or disruptors into your body. You won't know if that child is going to be able to have children or not for maybe 20 years. So we really are putting ourselves at severe risk by coming in contact. Now we've got blue-green algae, which we know is associated with dementia, ALS. It's been all over the news, Alzheimer's. Autism. So now imagine 5-10 years from now, they've come in contact with it. They start developing these symptoms. Are they going to be able to correlate this? This is why the news is vital, and programs like this really help us get to the community, to bring the issues to them, help them start learning. We want every citizen in this area that loves this area, makes this their home, runs their businesses, puts their kids in school. We want them to realize that their environment does impact their overall life, their happiness, their life, their liberties, their pursuit of happiness. We don't get to go kayaking anymore. We don't get to go paddleboarding. We don't go lay by the beach. We don't fish out of the river. Actually, we drive by the river and our stomachs turn as we're watching people getting in it and fishing out of it. My big joke was, give me a golf cart and a bullhorn and I'll run 156 miles north and then I'll run 156 miles south, yelling at everybody. It seems silly, but this is literally what the citizens have been reduced to having to do. We have to do this job ourselves because we have an inept government.
I agree with you on all those, and Gail, you had a good point about the Lowe's and the Home Depot selling fertilizer when they're not supposed to be selling fertilizer.
That's right.
Whatever I can do locally, I know that the citizens of Port St. Lucie and the Treasure Coast are very active on issues, and they did a huge letter writing campaign and really got involved in bringing the VA nursing home to Port St. Lucie. And I feel this is even more important than saving the Indian River Lagoon. So possibly you be in the activist you are, Gail, and you be in the founder, Carrie. Maybe you can kind of maybe work through my council office, get the citizens, a letter writing campaign, or
thank you
maybe
very
do
much.
Something like we did with the VA nursing. You just have to put pressure on the elected officiels.
We
want the truth.
Education to the public.
Education. Yeah.
The truth is the thing. We've had people playing against all four sides trying to get their agendas covered, and there's a good guy, bad guy kind of deal. We're not the bad guys, and we know we're not the bad guys because we care about everybody in our community. When we look at our governments, our state government, we realize there's 67 counties in this state, and they're not advocating for anything for our health and well-being. They talk about jobs. but we have a lot of good friends, right, that we networked, people that we, all three of us know, that we've networked for many, many years with, that are out of business. And they've lived here their whole lives. They grew up here. Being chased out of your home and having to find another place to relocate to, I think that's a crime. I think it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to watch our friends go out of business like that.
One other thing you brought up too is going into the water, fishing in the water. I think one of you brought it up before we started taping about the breathing, just the chemicals. I mean, you can be just sitting outside at a waterfront restaurant,
big headache
in Jensen Beach or maybe in Fort Pierce.
That's related to the ALS and the Alzheimer's.
So again, it's just the vapors coming.
It's a scientific fact that it's related, to the green algae.
Yeah, and which we're about to have a huge explosion of, so get ready, and everybody stay out of it, and spread the news. One of the things that Gail and I first worked on was, of course, getting to the community, but we knew right off the rip that we were going to go global with this, and we have. Our articles, our publications, all of our things that we've been doing have been broadcasted. Australia, Germany, Sweden, England, it's Canada, Mexico, it just goes on and on and on, where our articles are being shared around the world, because this is a global issue. Yes, this is our little home. This is our, watering hole that we like to go swim in, but this is a global issue. 1/5 of the world's ocean is hatched in that lagoon.
Oh, I did not know that. Wow.
And it's very interesting. What's going to happen to the world's oceans if we collapse that lagoon? We're going to collapse the world's ocean, and we're going to end up with more starvation, and we're going to end up with more disease. So...
Well, you guys are a wealth of information. Gail, you're from Chicago, correct?
I am from Chicago.
You're about the Great Lakes and the economy.
I thought we had bad politics in Chicago, but there's nothing, I tell everyone I have a new reverence for Al Capone, because he would look you in the eye and say, I'm going to shoot you and put you in the trunk. You knew. But Rick Scott is doing this to us, in front of us and behind our back, and we're paying his salary with our taxes. So this is a very, very
And he's siphoning our Amendment 1 money that we worked very hard to get that Amendment 1.
Water and land legacy, 75% of the voters, I know this is repetitious, but that money for land conservation was not being used correctly.
That's true.
Water and land legacy got Amendment 1 passed. Now they're using it for supplies and salaries. So there is corruption all through the government.
And we need to buy the land south of the lake. We need to clean that water.
Flow. Yeah.
Look, water hyacinth, those bee mats, the cattails, they turned them from a protected species into an invasive. They're only invasive because the nutrients are too prolific, but they actually clean the nutrients like 98%. So, we could be using these plants to clean the water, and if we end up growing too many, we could sell them around the world. We could ship these plants around the world, and we could actually help the world clean up fresh water. So, we have the Clean Water Act that's being blatantly ignored. It's not just in our area. It's funny, getting into this with our own little area has turned into a statewide, from the Inverness to the St. John's to the Caloosahatchee to the Everglades. We went statewide. Now we've gone nationwide, and we're going worldwide with it, because it's a water issue, and that's going to affect every 3-year-old knows you have to have clean water. Why don't these people that are in these high standing positions in our state and national government ignoring these facts for the American people? Why are we ignoring this?
And Ron, what the public can do is support Mark Perry at the Florida Oceanographic, who is doing oyster restorations. I was amazed when I found that they pick up oysters from restaurants, the shells that are usually thrown in the garbage. They put them back into the water.
That's something we could advocate for in the area.
And Mark Perry at Florida Oceanographic is doing BMATs right now. So just contact, I think they have a workshop that you can go to, and you can actually make a BMAT to put back in the water.
Yeah.
John Vanilla at the Environmental Studies program in Jensen Beach has a plethora of information there that people should be using and back them up. I know financially it's hard, but they need support from the public to continue these programs.
If we ask the public, we've been rather successful with just being average girls in town.
Oh, you're above average girls. I'm thinking we're advocates, really, activists and advocates.
But we have been rather successful when we do these drives to get people to come out and do the oyster bagging. Chris Dazowski, the commissioner up in Fort Pierce, has done a wonderful job with partnering with the Heathcote Botanical Gardens. They swapped some county and some city land. They're building a dog park. They've got this beautiful lake out there. If the lake gets full, they've got it all hired off. The Virginia corridors are all hired off. We've got plantings in there. The water is crystal clear in that lake. And when it gets too high, we can actually restore the savannas and turn that into a grant program where we're actually receiving money from the state that's been set aside to create these types of projects. So there's tons of money there. We had a surplus of $168 billion or something like that in the state fund. There is plenty of money available for Florida to clean up its act. And there's plenty of projects, there's plenty of wonderful ideas. Go to the Rivers Coalition meeting. If you have an idea, bring it forward. Go meet with Mark Perry. Go talk to Marty Baum, the Indian River Keeper. I mean, there's nobody in this fight that's smarter, harder, or stronger than Marty Baum. He is our number one champion. And he has really worked so hard to bring education and all of us. I'm going to tell you, the one thing that's dangerous about our group, we like to call ourselves River Warriors. The one thing that's dangerous about us is that we're educated. The one thing that somebody that's corrupt hates is an educated
And this leads
community.
me to Orca. Orca has Kilroys that they put in the water, and they get 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes, the water sample is taken and sent to a computer about the quality. Now, we just found out that their funding was cut.
I wrote that down.
Rick Scott does not want the public to be able to go online and see where the water is dirty.
Doesn't want us educated.
So he wanted to take 15 of these Kilroys out. Now, as Carrie mentioned, Joe Negron, there's up and down. But Joe Negron did get money for the Kilroys to stay in the water for a few more months. They're very expensive. South Florida Water Management sends people out to test water. Now, I'm from Chicago, and I know the tide changes. The water moves constantly. You don't send people out to test water because this could have, gone down to the bottom, and it's ridiculous. And they do not want these Kilroys and Lobos out in the water, which is testing the water every 15 minutes. We have Grant Gilmore, we have Nathaniel Reed, Maggie Herchella. They're all telling them what to do, and they will not listen. They don't want to hear it. So if Carrie's not finished, I would like to talk about changing the politicians.
Yeah.
If you have anything else, because that's what has to be done.
I have it written down in my notes about the Kilroys being,
the other thing is get involved with our groups. We do have a reference page. The group that I started is a very large group, and Facebook limited us and turned it into a private group. But we do have a reference page called Save the Indian River Lagoon. On Facebook, you can pretty much type in Indian River Lagoon. Stay on top of things. Don't believe everything that you... I'll put it to you this way. We're not getting paid for anything. We donate our time 100%, all of us. A lot of us have lost our jobs. Some of us have lost our marriages because we feel so passionately about doing what we can do. It's been a difficult road, but the thing is when you look at people who have certain agendas, you always have to ask, what are they getting out of it? You can trust us because we're not getting anything out of it. You can't trust the ones that are passing money along. They're passing the buck. They're passing the ideas. They're doing everything they can to work against us. And really what we'd love is for them to work with us, for them to listen to science. We've got almost 100 years worth of data. We've been doing this for almost 100 years. There's all this scientific data that tells you that this estuary is a very special place in the whole world.
One of the greatest assets we have, again, if you think about it, here in Port St. Lucie, we have the savannas, you got the Indian River Lagoon, you got the ocean. I mean, we have it all. The quality of life, Carrie.
The Crosstown Bridge, they're going through the Savannah Preserve, and I thought preserve meant
not
preserve.
to be touched.
You know, it's a
Yeah.
it's
We
a
want to, that's for another
I know,
topic
we
for
could
another
go
show.
on and on.
No, but I'm very appreciative of both of you taking the time out to spend here
I
on
want to
TV.
thank you for inviting us,
No,
because
again,
this is what we need. We need exposure.
Well, whatever we can do on the city level, please let me know.
Thank you.
I'm up for re-election this year, and 4 years ago, the issues were completely different. All of a sudden, the city's $220 million in debt. I had nothing to do with that. That's an issue.
Right.
Saving the Indian River Lagoon is my number 2 issue, and then protecting our quality of life.
Well,
so
you know,
your visit's timely.
Living in Martin County, I love Martin County, but sometimes I wish I could vote, and for the St.
I love Martin County and St. Lucie County. I love both. My first office was on Confusion
All
Corner
right.
back
We
in
will be there for you,
1977. So
Well, I work in Martin County, but I live in St. Lucie County. So
it doesn't make a difference.
But
We
the
all enjoyed the river. We all enjoyed the.
the Treasure Coast was actually formed Indian River, Okeechobee, Martin, St. Lucie, and Palm Beach County because we had one sheriff. And back when the Ashley gang was shot in downtown Stewart, he shot them in Sebastian, but he was the only man. And this is the thing. This whole area has been linked forever, and we all have to work together. What happens north of the lake, what happens south of the lake, what happens in the St. John's, what happens in Inverness, all bodies of water flow south to the Bay of Miami. Now, Miami's my home. I'm in love with the Everglades. I always have been. I was an Everglades kid. I grew up being a Girl Scout brownie, a Girl Scout leader down the road. But the point is I spent a lot of time down there and understanding the dynamics of water hydrology. It was actually one of the, I think, best questions that was asked when we went to D.C. What is the state of Florida, who is, predominantly water, what are we doing to work with water hydrologists and scientists around the world to fix? We didn't know better in 1700, 1800, maybe even early 1900. We didn't know better. We thought this was a good idea. Now we know. And what we know is that we need nature to be as pristine as possible and as natural as possible so that we all benefit from it.
Again, why I wanted to have you on is that you're not a politician, you're not a special interest.
Right.
I retired here after teaching special ed 38 years in Chicago to relax, have peace and quiet, and go swimming and be in the sun. I've had skin cancer twice. 60 years ago, we should have had windmills, solar, electric cars, and we would have an ozone layer. That's a whole nother problem. But not to be able to go swimming and walk the beach, why did I retire here? I don't want to go back up north because I don't like snow. But where am I going to go? I love the Treasure Coast. So
both of you stay here, and we'll get the restoration going. We'll get to know it. You guys are spark plugs. You're dynamos.
My roots are so deep I can't go anywhere.
Well, again, thank you so much for being on TV 20 and PSL Living, and we'll be right back after these important messages.